If you're buying a 4 bedroom detached home in Richmond Hill, the average price point for something like that is about 1.5 million.
We can do that all day long at 550.
I've really been wanting to do a video with you for a long time because, in my mind, you are the authority on real estate in Edmonton. I know that there has been just so much going on in the market this past year, right across the country. And I really just wanted to ask you kind of what is happening in your marketplace. I know that earlier in the year, you guys were seeing a huge influx of people over COVID, especially coming from Ontario, from Toronto into Alberta and Edmonton.
Yeah, the like kind of a brief history of our market here in Edmonton is during COVID, we actually didn't have the crazy pandemic market that other people had. Like our market previous to COVID was moving downward. Could you imagine that? Every year you're selling houses and the people that own them actually have less equity the next year than they did the year before. And then as we went through 20 and 21, we started to see that kind of level out and start to pick up. And it did end up being that people made back some of the money they lost over years in months. But then in 22, we saw like the a really hot part of our market. Like in March was the first time that we even got a taste of some of the things that had happened in the Greater Toronto area, where there was like over 30 offers and so on. We had one listing that had over 60 showings on opening weekend, and I think right around a dozen offers. And after that, all of a sudden it was back to regular. Like we really got into that position where we had low months of inventory for just a couple of months. And the good news to the end of that story is as markets are starting to adjust and correct here, we are getting more net migration, more people moving here than any time since 2014. There's like 35,000 new Albertans, and they got to have somewhere to live.
And where are these people coming from? Are they coming from Ontario?
See, with all of my teammates, we're talking about out of province plate. So taking a look at where these license plates are in traffic, like I saw Texas this morning, lots from BC, lots from Ontario. Where the like every one of my teammates has had multiple buyers coming in from outside of the greater Edmonton area in the last 30 days. And what they're mainly reporting is it's coming from places where it's much more expensive to live. Like in Vancouver, I think you need a household income of 150,000 just to rent, right? Whereas here, like the average household income is around 90,000 and it's only like 5 times the average household income to buy the average house.
So let's talk about affordability then for a second, because I think in Toronto, in the greater Toronto area where I work, the difference in conversation when it comes to price versus affordability is just a way different conversation. You know, as prices increase, affordability gets worse and worse and worse, and we don't play catch up with our incomes very well when it comes to that. So we're at a point now where I think in the greater Toronto area, we're at about 66 to 70% of household income goes to the cost of actually holding a property versus, and that can be in rent or in a mortgage. What does that look like as a ratio for you guys in Edmonton?
I would say that like most of people would be under 40%.
Wow, that's a big
Like
difference.
when you take a look at a $500,000 house and you say, I'm going to finance 400,000 of that, right? Like that's really only a mortgage payment of a couple $1,000s a month. And that will
So,
get you like a pretty great house in Edmonton. And I'm talking a house, not a condo.
mhm. And the one thing that I really am curious about is how your market, I I guess because Toronto is more of really a service-based type of uh, economy, and you guys are a lot more affected, I'm guessing, by the energy sector. And how has
Mm-hmm.
that been looking over the last little while? How has it looked through COVID? And what are you seeing now?
Honestly, the mentality in Alberta is that we understand the boom and bust of the energy sector. Like most people that have had a 30-year career here have seen it a few times. But that's also something that they're trying to combat. Like I was talking to the CEO of Alberta Innovates, and the amount of technology that's developing here in Edmonton and Calgary is it's uncommon. And so they're really looking to take the advantage of this energy sector boom and using it to fund more diversification, to get more projects in place. So right now, oil is high. Oil has been high for quite a long time. In fact, oil has been high for longer than oil companies thought it would be. And so they were really nervous when oil went up and originally to announce projects because a lot of the time their projects will take a couple years to complete. And they thought, oh, is oil still going to be high when we're able to monetize this? And now that they're seeing that it's sustaining further, that's going to be something that they're really interested in. And in fact, it could be something that's years long. Like, did you know that the U.S. has not had lower oil reserves since the early 1980s?
No, I did
Like,
not
they
know that.
normally keep 300, like I think it's 300 billion barrels of oil, is like their what they keep in reserve. And I might be a magnitude off. Actually, it might be 300 million barrels of oil. But anyway, they haven't been lower than this since the 1980s. Like right going into COVID is when they started to really deplete their reserves. And now with all the conflict that's going in Eastern Europe, these are the things that are really putting pressure up on energy prices. And what that does for things here is it means that we need people. Like we need people. There's an entire subway station in Toronto, Ontario that talks about moving to Alberta. Like the amount that we're spending on marketing to get more people here is why we're seeing these like amazing numbers. 35,000 new Albertans. That we haven't seen numbers like that since 2014. And oil was $140 a barrel in 2014.
Interesting. What is the average and medium price just for, a regular kind of old house in Edmonton or versus something, that's comparable to a suburb of Toronto?
So let's talk about it a little bit. Like, let's talk characteristics of a house. So if
Yeah.
you're talking about the suburbs of Ontario, of like, so for people that don't want to live right in Toronto, they're going to be buying out in the places that are nearby. And if they wanted like a 2,000 square foot 2-story with a double attached garage and a fully finished basement, what does that cost there?
If you're buying a 4 bedroom detached home in Richmond Hill, the average price point for something like that is about 1.5 million. And
Mm.
that's not even really securing you a finished basement with 100% certainty. It would really depend on the pocket.
We can do that all day long at 550, right? Like if you wanted to build something brand new that had high finishings, and we are talking like a 2,300 square foot 2-story with a fully finished basement, and I'm talking about one of the nicest suburbs in the greater Edmonton area, like Sherwood Park, you're still going to be in the sixes, right? There's
And
some stuff that
that's
creeps into the sevens and change, but like then you start getting into really large places. There are very few properties in the greater Edmonton area that reach that like $4 million mark. Like it is not very many per year. For example, the number of properties that sold that were over $1 million in like half a year would be about 150.
hmm.
On a good year, it might be 300.
And so I guess to circle back to how your market's been doing, I know that energy plays a huge, role in that. But these interest rate hikes, have they been slowing down your market at all, or have they been kind of a more neutral aspect because you guys just need more people?
Yeah, so the people are definitely like downplaying the effect, and also since inflation didn't pool here as much, it's not as affected, right? Like if you didn't go up, like what would you say the market? How much did houses change in price from 2020 to now? Like, let talk to me about the peak before it started to move downward.
From the beginning of the pandemic to the peak of the market, we saw an increase in the average price by at least 30%, if not 40.
And I gotta say that, like, really, when we're taking a look at like the year over year for us, like, we probably saw houses, like single family houses, from 2021 to 2020, sorry, to 2022. Really, not that much change. Like, they're probably up $10,000. Like, the average price here is 450 to 460. So these are the things that, like, even during the pandemic from 2020 to 2021, it would have been a very similar change, $10,000 to $20,000 on that, which would be like less than 5%. Most real estate markets are going to grow more than that in general. So we've basically been in this situation where we were in recovery while other people were booming, and now because we're so affordable, things are pooling here, and the interest rates are going to change price or change payments, but not very much when the average price is at this point, right? Like, when we're talking about a 1% change in our market, we're talking about a $250 payment change. When we're talking
Wow.
about like a 1% change in your market, like, way different, right?
I think that because the interest rates have affected our market so drastically because the prices are so high, our sales volume has just plummeted. I mean, fallen off a cliff, which has caused a lot of trouble for a lot of people. Having said that, if you guys are not as effective, how's your sales volume doing? Like, are you guys, relatively stable in terms of your sales volume?
Yeah, we're still diminishing, but not at the same effect. So, like, last year, if we took a look at like September, last year we were about 1,900 houses in the greater Edmonton area sold. We've got a population of about 1 million people. This year it was only 1,600, like just under 1,600 units. So that's still a pretty significant change from September to September. But what we're seeing is that, or with the amount of people moving here, we're seeing that a lot of properties near the bottom of our market are coming off the market. They're finding renters, right? As people move here, a lot of people will rent before they can purchase anything, and that's something that's going to really make the biggest change. So right now we're in a position where we might be petering off a little bit, but due to the fact that we were so beaten down beforehand, like, you were kind of experiencing what we did from 2014 to 2015. Like, I remember being in real estate and it just dropping off. All of a sudden oil went down. They weren't announcing jobs here. We saw net migration go down. And in that market, it was really interesting. And we made it through that market into where we are right now. And looking at that, the people that were hurt the most were the people at the bottom of the market. The least established people are always the hardest hit. And those groups, like, if they owned a $200,000 condo here, and you can buy a $200,000 condo here, if they owned one and they couldn't find a buyer because there was only one buyer for like seven sellers, then they couldn't sell to buy a $300,000 condo. And then the $300,000 condo couldn't sell to go and upgrade to a $400,000 condo. So because our market ended up with challenges right at the bottom, all of those verticals were gone. And that really shaped how our market got going. And it meant that condos, even last year, were, I saw 11 months of inventory in some neighborhoods. Can you believe that?
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. It's like frozen solid. And now it's starting to thaw. And so what we're seeing is that as that starts to break through, there's going to be a lot of people that haven't been able to make those changes that will make that change. And I don't think that interest rates are going to dissuade them the same way they will in other places. Because if they can survive 70% of their money going towards shelter where you're at, we got a long room to move. But like, a lot of people here like lifestyle. They eat out. Like, almost everybody here owns a car. At like the price points that we're talking about people that have large yards. That's something that I think is really attractive.
You just described the complete opposite of Toronto because we're down year over year 44% in sales volume.
Hmm.
And which is pretty staggering. And in terms of uh, the condo market, it's the by far the best performing asset right now, whereas detached are falling off a cliff. Um, right now, condos are up 12% year over year.
Amazing. That's really
Yeah.
interesting to me because like when we took a look at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of pandemic, everybody was moving out of density, right? They were leaving
Yes.
places where there were condos to go buy places where there was single family, and we saw that like asymmetry where single family was rising disproportionately with the condos, and now they're going to correct disproportionately with the condos.
That's exactly what we're seeing here. Is we're seeing that correction. We're seeing the flood back to the core of the city, and in fact, a lot of investors as well looking for condos in the core of the city because rents are at an all-time high. They're up 20% year over year,
You know
and
what's crazy? You're saying rent is up? Rent is directly correlated to interest rates, right?
yes,
I don't know if Edmontonians are gun shy, but nobody's raising rents here, and we got no limits, hey? Like you know how you guys have all that regulation on how much you can change rents?
yeah,
There
rent
is
control.
way less regulation here, and we're still not seeing like that. Like right now, I really think that anybody who is an investor out of Edmonton, this place has huge potential there because buying places that are marketed with the rents they're getting right now, moving in and making rent adjustments, that's probably a major play here.
Wow, you guys don't have any rent control in Edmonton at all.
We have a general landlord tenancy act and so on. There are some limitations, but like you guys have like a limits as to how often and how much you can change your rent, right?
Correct.
I don't believe that we have limits on how much you can change your rent.
Wow, that's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to somebody who was thinking about moving to Edmonton from Toronto?
Bring your jacket. What I would say is that like what people enjoy about being here is the fact that it's a young, vibrant population. It's actually the youngest average age throughout Canada. So that changes the way the city feels. It changes the festivals we get. We get like Red Bull crushed ice. We get like you know they snowboard in the river valley and different things like that. It's also a northern like a little bit more of a northern culture. And the thing that I really like about here is I find that cold places make warm people. The interactions that you have with strangers here are very positive. The place is considered friendly overall. People that are considering moving to Edmonton also obviously if they're moving from places like Toronto, the way their money works here is going to be way different. So meaning that like what you actually how much of your income will go towards where you live, but also how much of your income goes to taxes. We don't have PST. Like we have GST and that's it. They're like consumption tax. We don't have like they're just introducing some type of luxury tax on like cars over 100,000 or something like that. But outside of that, we don't have a lot of like taxes. Our income tax is pretty low. In fact, one of the lowest in the country. So that's one of the things that a lot of people enjoy here is if you like to travel, this is a great place to set up, to have your home base and go and travel. The biggest movement I've seen recently here is TikTokers. TikTokers moving to Alberta. The people that are trying to make a living on content creation, they're really understanding that if you can technically work remotely, you should do it from here. And we're also seeing that from places like Toronto and Vancouver. Is people that are getting wages by working remotely there in that place where they have to pay more because the majority of their hiring pool is inside of their commuter circle, but then working remotely from here. So there's a lot of things that really changes. What else would I say to somebody who's moving here from Toronto? I would also I would say that there's really low density here. So if you were dependent on things like transit before, you may want to consider owning a car.
Mm-hmm. Wow. This is every time we speak, there's just so much. so much information. You're just such a wealth of knowledge. So
Thanks, Adam.
I'm definitely gonna have my work cut out for me to edit this all together for YouTube. But I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And if there's anybody out there who is considering a move to Edmonton, Taylor Hack is the authority on real estate in Edmonton and a wealth of knowledge on a whole bunch of other subjects as well. I could just talk to this guy for hours. So feel free to give him a shout. You will see his information in the description below. Taylor, thanks so much for joining me.
Always good, and I'm super excited that you are doing this. I think more people should hear you, Adam. You always have great insight, and you also have a great way of communicating with people and asking questions. So I'm excited to see you reveal the country one municipality at a time.
If you like that video, click the subscribe button on the right, or feel free to enjoy another video here on the left.